Hi, I'm Mike McMahon, the showrunner and creator of Star Trek Lower Decks, and you are watching TrekCulture.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the TrekCulture podcast. We are your hosts, Sean and Ellie, and we are delighted to welcome back a man we feel probably should be on the TrekCulture payroll at this point, the wonderful Aaron Waltke. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm good. Salutations, mes capitaines.
I thank you. I thank you currently. There's so much we want to ask you because Prodigy is the thing right now. It has been, everything we're seeing, it's love letter after love letter. We've watched the series ourselves a couple of times already. It sounds like, oh, that's not a lot, Sean. It's 20 episodes. We are loving the fact that we're getting through it as much. Poor Ellie. Ellie's going to tell you about the Easter eggs she's been going through. But what we
Sorry about that.
It's fine. It's fine. They don't haunt my dreams or anything.
Chamuzi. Aaron, how are you? You must be like the weight of secrecy that must be coming off your shoulders this past fortnight. How has it been?
It's been a journey. That's been for certain. I obviously some of these things we somehow managed to preserve secret. This is a full spoiler talk, right? Are we assuming that everyone has seen the full season?
Yeah.
Okay. So especially things like Will Wheaton coming back as the Traveler / Wesley in this very sort of elaborate arc we have, especially in the back half of this season. That stuff was very hard to contain. Just because I remember I was at I think it was Mission Chicago. That's how long ago this was.
Wow.
And I was at a dinner with Kate Mulgrew, and she straight up said, like, Aaron, where are we? And, just wanted me to kind of like talk about, I think, in the process, but also in the story, she was just curious, I think, because she obviously reads the scripts, but she wants to know what the whole master plan is, as any great actor should. And so while I was talking about that, I was like, yeah. And so they started getting these messages from Wesley, and calling them to try to fix the timeline. And then I looked to my left and I realized there's like a fan standing right there. And I was like, retro. And so I was like, just so you know, like, please keep this under the lid. But thankfully it was, Marina Kravchuk, who is the host of Mission Log Prodigy, and she was like, "My lips are sealed." So she is. I want to ask her at some point if she even remembered that, or if she even caught that I had said Wesley at that point. But that was the closest I think it ever came out, and it was purely, I was talking with our lead, so I wasn't thinking in that regard. Yeah, it's a relief. I'm glad that it's all out there for everybody to enjoy, and it is. Never in my wildest. I was hoping that it would have a positive reception, but the fans have really taken it through the stratosphere with some very superlative comments about our series, especially season 2. And the Midwesterner in me doesn't know how to take compliments, so I'm just like, thank you. But it very much was a group effort. And I'm so proud of the whole Star Trek Prodigy team, our writers. Obviously Dan and Kevin, for making this space for everybody to play at the top of their intelligence, our artists, our editors, our sound designers, who really got beat up this season because there's so much going on sometimes. Everybody just did a phenomenal job with the limited resources we had.
I just want to touch on what you just said about keeping things secret, because the fan base in particular for this season has been incredible. All 20 episodes dropped at once, and it took a good week for me to see any major spoilers popping up on my feed. And I didn't block any. I had seen it, so I was like, well, it'll come. And they were very respectful, and particularly the French fans who had seen it a lot earlier. And the fact that that secret was still kept. I think a round of applause to the French fans, because how they kept that a secret.
Merci beaucoup. That was a tricky situation because France was allowed to release the season, and so the French viewers who had seen it there were well within their rights to watch it. But huge kudos to them for collectively saying, we will honor our alliance dating back to the Revolutionary War, and France will stand by the rest of the world and save them once again.
That's quite funny. There's a fellow I'm connected to on Twitter, Paul O'Kelly, who messaged me straight away. He's a fluent French speaker. Is not a French person himself, and he was just like, couldn't wait, had to go, found it. It was fantastic. And I'm pretty sure he's. I think you've spoken to him recently because he was just like, it feels like I'm sitting on the best season of Star Trek and I can't talk about it yet. And it's like, oh my god.
That is what it's like, isn't it?
I'm immensely proud of the Trekkie community for everybody. And even now, people are being very respectful, tagging all of their posts with the right tags so that people can mute it and catch up. Because, this has never happened before with 20 episodes of Star Trek at once. And, I think there are there are other franchises that maybe they wouldn't be as sort of thoughtful in terms of, spoilers. I think there's people that would gladly take set pictures and post them online, but not the Star Trek fans. They're like, let's watch this as intended.
Actually, I want to ask you about the Easter eggs, because there are so
Sure.
many Easter eggs in this season. But how do you go about deciding what are we actually going to put in there, especially when they're relevant to a specific character? I mean, for example, Janeway's ready room. There's only space for a certain amount of things on that shelf. So how do you decide what goes on that shelf?
Well, I can tell you that when it came to, for instance, her ready room shelf, I think in the grand scheme of things, that was just kind of something that they were saving for last. And they asked me, like, what are some things that should be on her shelf? And I think I gave a list of something like 30 or 40 items. And they were like, here's the ones we can build in time. But I definitely put them in list of importance, and I didn't want it to just be a rehash of what we already saw on her shelf, on Voyager, because obviously time has passed, and she would probably want some mementos even from that time. So I gave them a list of 30, and the artists did very well with what they could, and I think that I love that the spider hairpin from Queen Arachnia showed up. I even gave them a few like super deep cut ones that I was surprised that at least one fan figured out without my nudging them, that the seal of Bloomington, Indiana, which is sort of like a little sort of an honorific, I think, because Bloomington itself is very popular, very proud of the fact that Janeway is from there and has recently built a statue there. And also, I have a personal connection to it because my family's from there and I went to college there. My grandparents literally grew up in Bloomington, as did my dad. And so, it was. It was a few items that I think that I had suggested that didn't make it on there. I said, maybe the compass that Amelia Earhart had that you saw on screen for like 3 seconds. I was like, that'd be a deep cut. What else? I'll send you a list at some point.
I mean, we will admit the Bloomington one we did have to ask, but not before we did a lot of digging ourselves. You should have seen us. We had episode after episode. We were like, is it from a holodeck program? We were like, oh, what about when she was a governess? Is it a tea plate? What is it? Then we were like, maybe it's from Workforce. Maybe it's from this. We did some digging before we had to admit defeat and ask for help with that one. But you're right, there are certainly deep cut ones. I mean, the mirror, that was deep cut. And I gave myself
that was very deep cut. Yeah, I was actually shocked that you were able to find it so quickly. I thought that was going to be one that hung around for a month or so but you like immediately you're like, I think it's from Isabel's shirt. Is that right? I was like, yes.
Well, to be fair, it wasn't very long ago that I read it, but yeah.
Even so.
Well done, Ellie.
Is that one of those moments where you're
the art
so happy that she got it, and on the other hand, you're like, oh, I thought I was being clever there.
Well, in a weird way, like I didn't mean to create sort of like a treasure hunt with the like Murph species in season 1, but now I've been trying to recreate that magic of just like, because when I offhandedly said I'm surprised nobody's guessed what Murph is, it became this like viral sensation in the Trek community of people like coming out with the most obscure ideas. I think, and Danubian slime devil was one. I was like, that's pretty good. But of course, he was a melanoid slime worm. But one person out of the thousands of guesses got it right, and I was like, I wonder who that one person is going to be for this mirror, and it was Ellie before the show
me.
even came out.
To be fair, though, we had an advantage because there were a lot of fans that did spot it, but we saw the episodes a few days before everyone else got the chance to. So I'm going to take the claim, though. It was me. Nobody else. I got it. But what's one that you put in there that your favorite, you're the most proud of? Whether it's one that no one's noticed or one that loads of people have noticed, but you're like, I'm proud of that one.
In terms of the Easter eggs.
Yeah.
God, I mean, there's so many like to count. Like some folks have asked me, like, you know, for season 1, they often gave you the episodes that were just like packed to the gills with Star Trek references. Are there any episodes like that? It's like the whole season's like that for season 2. I mean, the one I love the most is the one that Jen Murrow and I came up together, which is the fact that the whale is named Jillian. That's not like a deep cut one, but I really appreciate. I love that it unfolds a whole narrative in your mind of like what happened with the whales after, but we don't have to go into it in any detail. So in Janeway's final log, there's a it begins with like an old friend once said that about time's passage is about time's presence within us, and that is in fact a deep cut to a deleted scene from Star Trek Nemesis, which never saw the light of day until the DVD extras, in which Data is talking with Picard and talking about the nature of the passage of time and how it sort of denotes meaning in humanity's life. And so it was such a beautiful idea that we expand upon in that log. And I thought, you know, especially in Nemesis, where it's clear that Janeway and Picard have a relationship. She's like, how are you, Jean-Luc? That wouldn't it be interesting to kind of call back to that, especially in an episode that deals so directly with Picard's life in the show that is eponymous to him.
That's actually okay. That's a fantastic segue, because how early in the planning process did you know where it was going to get to? Like, was this always end of season 2? It was going to be the supernova or the attack on Mars, or was this something that sort of just naturally, when you looked at your timeline, said, "Oh yeah, no, I think this makes sense that we get here"?
Right. So we knew from before we even wrote season 1 what we were building towards, because one of our staff writers on the show, Deandra Pendleton Thompson, a phenomenal writer, was a writer's assistant on Picard season 1. So we had this wonderful brain trust that we knew everything that was going to happen in Picard. You know, we had the scripts obviously, but she was able to, some of the things were still being tweaked in the last few episodes, but she knew where they were going with it. And if you remember in Picard season 1, right there in the pilot is the destruction of Utopia Planitia, which takes place in 2385, and we knew that we didn't want to stay forever in 2383. I think our first season starts at the end of 2383, goes through 2384 and onward. And I think all of the writers, the Hagemans, myself, everybody, none of us were particularly interested in kind of hand waving and saying, "Oh, we're never going to get there," because you know that's not the nature of how canon works. And you know, we could kind of fudge it, I guess, and say like, "Oh, each season takes place over a few days or something." But that I think we have a bad habit in the Prodigy writers room. If somebody says, "Oh, that would be hard to do," then we throw down the gauntlet and say, "Challenge accepted." And so it was it was there from the beginning. We knew that we were going to build to that moment, and it would be a transformative chapter, turning of a chapter in the story, but not the end of it. And you know, I think if anything Star Trek has taught us is that every story can be told from many, many perspectives, and cultures are not monolithic, and Starfleet is no exception to that. And while Picard, in the, I think, grand total of like 4 minutes that it shows of 2385, we knew And everyone agreed that was not the whole story. It was a small snippet of it from the perspective of Picard in one of the worst moments of his life. And so we were like, let's see what's going on with the rest of it. See how there were debates, as any good Ready Room scene has, about what the best path forward was, and how there were probably myriad solutions sort of suggested, and that's what we knew we were building towards with season 2. Like, obviously we had to pitch that to the network, but I think the way we said it was like, yes, it is a slightly darker period of Starfleet's history where they kind of pull back, but we want to be the beacon of light in that darkness and say that no matter how difficult things become, there's always going to be someone that will help lift you up and be there to help you through those tough times and beyond. And I think for young people or old people, it's always worth remembering that disasters are always going to happen, but you always pick yourself back up, and you see who else you can reach out to lift up with you.
I think that's one of the beautiful things about Prodigy, and it's something that the Hagemans also said when we spoke to them about how, yes, it's a show that maybe is framed at a younger audience, but I like that you guys don't shy away from the darker tones. Obviously, there are limits to certain things, but I think it's important for kids to know about all of life. I mean, obviously, there aren't actually time-eating aliens coming after you, but I think...
Or are there?
Maybe there are. Obviously, we've spoken about Doctor Who influencing a lot of elements of season 2, and that's another show that, I mean, particularly from 2005 when it came back, it was scary, and it was a show that was kind of aimed at a younger audience, but again, the same thing.
Sure.
Yes, it was scary. I mean, those gas mask zombies still traumatize me now, but it's like it's a thing.
What did it say? It was like, "Are you my mommy?" or something like that.
They're like, "Mommy."
Yeah. I think Doctor Who's a great example because it is ostensibly a children's show, but they're not afraid to hit those deeper themes, and it's enjoyed by everybody because of that. And obviously, creatures that eat or consume time, or people from the past, and there's other examples in sci-fi. Stephen King's The Langoliers, Doctor Who's The Reavers. I think there's a whole TV tropes article on, they call them cockroaches. But we wanted to put our spin on it, and it felt appropriate for somebody like Wesley, who is effectively, he's not a god, but he's ascended in a certain way. And we're like, well, what if there was entities that evolved naturally to have the same powers, but we're doing it simply to fulfill their hunger as locusts?
I mean, your show at least closed the door on those creatures with like an explanation as to why they're never coming back. Doctor Who just introduced them once, and then every other time there was a paradox, it was like, you remember those creatures that are supposed to appear every time there's a paradox? What happened to them? They busy that day?
Right. And partially the reason they appeared in our show is because because our time loop, I think, might be one of the biggest, longest running time loops in terms of screen time in Star Trek history. Like, depending on how you define it, you could say the entire 40 episodes are one giant time loop that was kind of left open and then pried open by the events of season 2. And that, because the universe was in this sort of in-between flux, that's how the loom sort of started entering out the Prime universe. It gets very timey-wimey, that's for sure.
It gets very timey-wimey. But in a way that it's not too difficult to follow as well. And for yourselves writing that can't have been easy, because you'll add something else, and then you've got, but this house of cards right here, if you add that, does that affect that one over there? How does this work?
Yeah, you're right. And I will say that there are definitely people in the room, especially the Hagemans, who were not thrilled with the idea that it's baked into the plot of season 2 that we had to do time travel. And understandably so, because, you have to make sure that it's coherent. At least, even if it's complicated, it needs to be able to make some sort of sense. And thankfully, I love time travel. I've seen every Star Trek time travel episode. I've seen almost all time travel media ever made. I love it. And so, I was not afraid of that sort of challenge. I think the biggest challenge was explaining it in a way that families could watch it together and not get lost in the weeds. I think even the first time we tried to pitch out the season, once we had figured it all out to the network, we started by just trying to explain the time travel at all, and they were just like, "What?" And we were like, "They're finding Chakotay. They need to find the protostar. It's fine."
But you just mentioned Chakotay there, and his character in particular, I think, is one that kind of famously had not such great treatment in the writing in Voyager. Okay, as the seasons went on, he kind of dwindled a little bit, and that was something that a lot of fans commented on. So obviously, when you're writing new characters, you've got Dal and Gwyn, you've got a lot more freedom with those. But when you're writing for a character who historically hasn't had the best treatment, how do you go about making sure that you do it right this time?
Well, I mean, what I can say is for a number of reasons, our philosophy on Prodigy is, with a few exceptions where we're just being cheeky, if we're going to bring a character into the show, it's going to be for a very specific purpose, and they're not just going to be around, because we like them. It's because they not only will they have a profound influence on the character arcs of our characters, but also the Prodigy crew will have an effect on them. Like, they will have an arc and a story in our series just as much as our young crew would. And so our kind of attitude with Chakotay was like, it's no secret that his writing was a little uneven, and I think the indigenous community obviously there was a number of things we had listened to them about, like, what they wanted to see with that character. Like, in a way they appreciated the attempt, but the fact that they didn't give him an actual heritage, and then they wound up kind of just making something up and moving on, and then they didn't know what to do with him afterwards. And there's a couple of seasons where he kind of was pushed to the background. In this case, we wanted to take very delicate care and find not only a heritage that would align with what we had seen of his backstory, but also within the canon of Star Trek. We pulled from Beta Canon. He's from Trebus, which is a planet that was mentioned in Jerry Taylor's novel, I think Pathways, maybe. And we gave him a heritage that aligned with the actor's heritage as well, from Central America. And the Nicarao and Ometepe people who actually created those spiral petroglyphs that you see mean something great to him. And then on top of that, within the scope of our show, we wanted to give Chakotay a story, a proper story. A captain who's lost his crew and has kind of reverted back to his sort of like, lone soldier ways of just trying to protect the ones he loves, because he's experienced so much loss, and not the least of which was his connection with his captain, Captain Janeway. And so when we meet Chakotay, we realized that it might have been a little bit of an uphill battle to make people care about Chakotay because of his mixed response previously, but we realized that, if we make it very clear that he's had a rough go of it and it's a chance for redemption, if that plays into the arc of his character, people will want to root for him. And I think that's where we weren't afraid to go to those really deep emotional places. And we really liked that we could give Chakotay sort of a redemption arc of sorts, where we got to see what he was like without Voyager, which he admits saved him, and how he could sort of save himself again, and in doing so become an interesting role model for Dal, who I think is trying to find his own place this season. And we thought, in terms of Dal's character arc for this season, from the beginning, he's certainly shaped up into a fine-ish cadet, but I think he always kind of had this assumption that he had to be captain in order for any of it to be meaningful. And we didn't love that idea that oh well, somebody has to just tell themselves they're captain, and if they're not captain, they're a failure. Because they're like, think about how many kids are out there that grow up like, I want to be president and change the world. And not everybody is president, but there are still places where you can find where you're needed most. And that's where I think the ethos of Starfleet really lies. It's not about the captain saving the day. It's about everybody finding their place together in this great sort of unity in order to achieve great things that none of us could achieve by ourselves. And you discover your strengths as you go. And I think that that's something that Chakotay was able to impart to Dal, especially in that in episode 12. And it was, I think, a great lesson for everybody to think about, like, you know, life is rarely like a straight line. It's like stepping on river rocks across an uncertain sea, but eventually you'll sort of find your island. You'll find your crew.
I feel like you've just basically given a breakdown of my ups and downs for those 2 episodes. So I'm glad that I was getting the right message in those episodes. I think one of my points, spoiler alert, because I don't know if this is going out before or after my ups and downs for those episodes. One of my points that I wrote was basically Admiral Janeway and Chakotay are the parental figures to these kids. You know, you've had Admiral Janeway kind of leading them up to this point. Now they've met Chakotay and he's helping him in other ways. And all of these kids have kind of not had a parental figure in their lives. And so that's the role that these two take on. And my JC heart loves it. I think Mirror JC basically was giving fans what they all wanted without this is the thing. So as soon as I saw that episode, I was talking to Erin McNamara, who wrote that episode, and I was like, you've done the perfect thing here. Because, you know, fans want to see them all close, and this is the complete opposite of our Prime versions. So Janeway don't care if people can see them with a little bit PDA, a little bit close contact here, you know? But you haven't unwritten anything about Prime Janeway. She's still fine and dandy, and you've still given fans what they want. I loved it.
Yeah, and we didn't invent that. I think Mirror Universe folks have always been a little bohemian, shall we say, going all the way back to TOS. So I think it's just part of their culture.
One thing that I absolutely love, because it goes back to, I think, one of the first conversations you and I ever had, and it's about comm badges. And I love that in Aurora Boreas Part 2, it literally explains the continuity of comm badges through Voyager, through Picard, through Prodigy. And I wrote down, I said, talk to Aaron about this.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I've alluded to for as long as I've been able to talk about Star Trek publicly about this, is that, you know, I think it's something that you always have seen kind of like on the periphery, even going into the Berman era. But even there's moments in TOS where you see like people with different badges and different, according to the stations and whatnot. But you know, I think sometimes you're fighting against people's memory of how you know, ship uniforms work. Like, no, they all were like this, and it's like, well, go back and watch Tears of the Prophets. There's definitely people in TNG suits alongside the gray First Contact uniforms, or you know, I think there's the episode where Bashir goes to the Enterprise D, and they're just wearing different uniforms. And we've since seen different comm badges, you know, in especially in these transition periods, you know, even in Deep Space Nine, actually, they had the Bajoran comm badges that operated just like Star Trek, Starfleet proper comm badges. But I just wanted to codify it and make it very clear that they roll things out, you know, sort of region by region, and that's why you see different uniforms on Deep Space Nine and on Voyager at the same time. It's fine. We're all Starfleet. And what's funny to me is, like, whenever these conversations pop up on forums, inevitably someone who's actually in the military comes in and is like, do you know how many uniforms I have? I have 20 uniforms in my closet for different occasions and for different departments and sectors of the military. This is normal. I know you like that uniform, but it's normal. But yeah, I think, being a Star Trek fan myself, I just wanted to make it very clear. Don't worry, we're thinking about this stuff. The cool all good things comm badge, is that what it's from? that you see in here is going to eventually, become the main one, and then that will evolve into the badge that we see in Picard season 1 onwards, and then that'll become Picard season. So like it's a continuity, it's just like what Dal says at the end. There are people that sat in that chair before me, and there will people that come after. But what's important is, going where you're needed most right now. And I think that's also applies to uniforms and comm badges. Like, trust me, like it'll all sort itself out in the end. Just do your duty and watch season 2 of Star Trek Prodigy. Yeah, so it was fun to finally connect it officially to Picard flashbacks and stuff like that. But I do appreciate that everyone else has appreciated that I went the extra mile to work that in Jellicoe's speech.
Aaron, you've been a gent, you've been a star. Thank you so much. And yeah, I suppose live logs and proper to us all.
Yes. I've been trying to figure out what the peace and long life version of that would be. Would it be like pieces of log life?
Of log life.
I don't know. We'll workshop it.
Hey, do you know,
that's going in season 3.
If you want it to be that, it's that.
Right. Well, I guess, because it's always live log and live log. See, it's infected my brain where I can't even say live long and prosper anymore. All I say is live long and proper. Live long and prosper, peace and long life. Live logs and proper, pieces of log life. Sure. Okay. Yeah.
You heard it here first, folks.
Hey, one of us has been nominated for multiple Emmys, okay?
You full well that's going on a t-shirt.
Thank you so much for watching this abbreviated version of this podcast. Now, if you go to our audio platforms, you will get the full version of this podcast with this guest. So we really, really appreciate you subscribing to that, and you're just awesome and wonderful. Thank you so much.